When you take a game like Dune off the shelf for the first time, most people's first impressions is, this game looks pretty dry. And after looking at the game components on the initial impression, one could be forgiven for thinking that these pieces came out of a child's puzzle set, or even a game about crafting things or building really funny wooden structures. But then when you see the title Dune Imperium, you think, where is the sand in this game? But this game is more than meets the eye. It's all about building an empire made out of colored shapes. The lore that surrounds Dune is both expansive and is a thought-provoking piece of science fiction that depicts a futuristic human race set about 20,000 years into the future, where Earth has been destroyed, the humans are forced to colonize other planets, and all artificial intelligence has been obliterated and removed, and different human factions are trying to rise up and build up their empires. Whoa, this book is intense. I better bookmark it and save it for later. With such an immensely rich universe to draw upon, does Dune Imperium funnel the ideas and the world and the theme of Dune into a really good board game? And that's what we're about to uncover. Central to the story of Dune is spice, a valuable drug only found on the desert planet of Arrakis, thought to be produced and harvested from the worms that live there. And thus, here lies the crux of Dune Imperium. It's a game centered around the battle for control of spice, and as they say, whoever controls the spice, controls the board games. At the start of a game of Dune Imperium, players are going to be choosing one of these character cards that represents one of the four houses: Atreides, Harkonnen, Thorvald, and Rachis. Each character has a special ability and also a special effect that is triggered when players play the signet card from their player deck. Each round, players are going to be drawing cards from the deck that they've built, and they'll be sending different agents to different regions of the board based on the icons that appear on the cards that they play. Any unplayed cards that are left in a player's hand are then used to purchase other new cards from the market row, which are then added to a player's deck, which improves that deck's synergy, power level, and effects. Additionally, players will also be preparing their house for combat at the end of every round. Players will do this by deploying troops from the garrison out onto this combat space area. Each troop is worth 2 military points, and they're represented by these very ominous looking wooden cubes. Even I would be scared of them. Players are basically vying for particular prizes that are listed on these conflict cards which appear each and every round. They range from victory points to Solange, extra intrigue cards, things that really help you to boost your game and advance it. And whoever can get their marker to 10 victory points or more first will be the winner of the game. And they will prove to the other players that they are the controller of the spice and where it flows. Navigating the board in Dune Imperium is much like getting instructions from Google Maps. It's simple and easy to follow as you ride your sandworm with the Fremen to your next board game night. The game board is like a desert. No, seriously, it's literally deserted of any art whatsoever. In one region, you have the four factions, the Fremen, the Bene Gesserit, the Spacing Guild, and the Dark Emperor, all with its own vertical tracks that invite you to climb it like a political ladder, luring you with the juiciness of earning victory points and extra resources. At the top of the board, you have the Chome, where you sell your spice for Solange, the currency in the game. Or you could even go to the High Council, where if you bribe them enough and pay them with enough money, they'll provide you with some game-changing effects that can hopefully improve your efficiency. If you are adventurous enough, players can send their agents right into the harsh desert to harvest spice from the sandworms, or even send them off to these blue populated zones to prepare themselves for a military campaign. Ultimately, the board is like a square-shaped planet, which provides players a smorgasbord of choice and political interactions that are enough to make a lit-up Christmas tree seem like an afterthought. Most of the cards in a player's deck has icons on it that matches different regions on the game board. To deploy an agent to a particular region or space, a card with a matching icon needs to be played. What is really cool about this is that the benefit that players gain becomes twofold. They gain the action or resource on the grey space of the card that they just played, as well as the resource from the space that they sent their agent to. This interplay of playing cards from your hand and occupying all of the different spaces on the board with your agents really makes each and every decision quite agonizing. It often feels like you're exploring Disneyland for the first time in your life, and every ride that you want to go on seems to have a really long queue. One of the most critically important sections of the board that players are constantly competing across is the 4 faction tracks. Moving up each of the faction tracks is so important for getting not only endgame victory points, but also fighting for that faction support. Getting these little temporary victory points helps to swing the game slightly in your favor. But because they're temporary, they can be stolen from you. And in games like Kemet, where players are given temporary victory points, you know how easily those points can really swing and be swapped between player to player. The influence track is like a race. Each player has a cube, and through their cube pushing abilities, they are ultimately trying to climb the track to gain victory points. If a player ever reaches the gold zone, they develop an alliance with that particular faction, gaining a temporary victory point. However, if another player passes them, that victory point gets handed over to them. Each faction has a different flavor to it, so just like your favorite intergalactic football team or wizarding house, supporting each one has its own distinct theme. The Bene Gesserit are apt at acquiring intrigue cards and culling your deck, whilst the Fremens provide you access to fighters and water. Also, each of the factions has 2 spaces, one with a lower effect and one with a higher effect, where you do have to spend a few extra resources, but the resources are well worth the bonus that you get for using the higher level space. The fact that each of these tracks is a 4-way competition just really creates that sub-level of decision making as well as competition and racing effect. What really differentiates the deck building here compared with other games is the fact that you're basing your decisions on how to win by selecting the right cards that best synergize with your game strategy. It might be one that allows you to draw cards, providing you with more options, burning through your deck like some sort of giant worm, or it might be siding with the Fremen, who can give you more spice and help you to build your combat strength. You'll definitely spend a little bit of time tinkering, optimizing, and distilling your deck, establishing its flavor, and then sculling it like spice beef, and then frothing over your creation. One element that I think is hugely thematic about this game is that no card in your deck is ever wasted. Any cards that you don't play from your hands, you can use and reveal to combine their diamond value to purchase new and more powerful cards into your deck. The fact that you can use these as a currency for purchasing and build your deck so that it's a lot more powerful and stronger is not only a sign of intuitive but also good game design. Wow man, that soil looks really rich. What do you put in it? Oh, just this worm token and my entire game plan. There's some pretty awesome card combos that feature in the game that kind of generate some interesting political interactions with the other players at the table. Some cards that players play can force other players to discard cards from their hand. They might even help them gain intrigue cards, as well as converting important resources. There are a whole range of different types of cards, ones that reflect the different factions and their playstyle, ones where you can gain automatic victory points but also hinder the efficiency of your deck, and ones that just really bounce off each other and help to create cool chaining effects. Ultimately, discovering the card abilities, card effects, and card synergies and how they work together to not only maximize the resources that you get per round, as well as covering the board and giving you access to all of the different regions when you want to, is part of the beauty of what you discover throughout this game. Hey man, do you want to play a board game? I was thinking we could play Dune Imperium. It's like top 50 board games on Board Game Geek right now. Oh, I don't think I can. I've got to go out and buy some paints and do some miniature painting and also do some Christmas shopping. Sorry. The board games must flow. Oh look! My schedule just suddenly cleared up. I have many hours to play a game with you. Winning a conflict in Dune Imperium requires careful planning, strategy, and tactics. Players will be deploying troops which are represented by these sugar-like cubes. Except the combat in this game is rarely sugar-coated. The combat in Dune is like turning up the volume dial on a stereo. You want to be the loudest and boldest. Players across the game will be acquiring army units into the garrison through either card effects or even from the different spaces on the game board. Some of the spaces on the game board have these sword symbols, which means that when you send an agent to that space, you can deploy all the units acquired on that turn, plus up to 2 from your garrison, into the combat zone. At the end of a player's turn, the player's combat value is the sum of their unit value, which is worth 2 each, plus any swords played on the revealed cards, and any shown on the intrigue cards that they've played. The game makes it super simple to see who currently is the strongest by using this very linear track. It's as if you're moving the beads along an abacus, calculating whether you'll have enough numbers to dominate or not. At the end of the round, whoever has the most combat value gains the first prize on the conflict card. This jostling for the first place becomes the main crux and drives a lot of the player's actions. Towards the end of the game, this becomes the primary way to score those much needed victory points. Thematically speaking, I really love the ebb and flow of the game, as water is an incredibly scarce resource. I like how over the rounds, the unused desert spaces accumulate spice, making those spaces more valuable as the rounds progress. The card play is incredibly intriguing because you've got to strike the right balance between when you play a certain card or when to save a card in order to use it to purchase other cards into your deck. I also find that the different spaces on the board provide for some really interesting, tough choices, because not every space is always going to be open to you. There might be someone else's agent there, you might need particular resources to get to or use that space, and you need to also have the right icon on the card that you're currently playing this turn. There's a complex thought pattern that goes beyond just playing cards and moving workers out onto spaces on the board. You have to really carefully plan your strategy, and you have to carefully plan how you're going to execute that strategy to get the resources that you want to then get the bonuses that you need. I also love the ebb and flow of the combat that occurs each and every round. Each round feels like you're watching an episode of a really cool Marvel series where there's this build up to a huge climax at the end of an episode where you finally reveal who is the winner of the combat and who's going to gain the resources and how that's going to have consequences on the subsequent round of the game. Despite all of the beautiful intricacies that I just mentioned, Dune Imperium is far from being a perfect game. In fact, some of the mechanics could do with a little bit of added spice to it. First of all, when you look at the board itself, it does feel a little bit dry. It definitely screams Euro, which in the Euro in me absolutely loves, but for some players who really want to immerse in the world of Dune, looking at cubes in the combat zone just doesn't really have that same thematic feeling of seeing troops fight against each other. So they could have really replaced those with miniatures, which I think you can actually buy an upgrade pack for. The combat zone on the board feels more functional than more like an epic battleground. Also, the combat in this game feels more like a puzzle in terms of trying to get your combat value as high as you can. It doesn't really feel like you're facing off with other armies and trying to knock them out from combat. I also felt that throughout the course of the game and throughout your journey, each of the resources kind of became more valuable or less valuable as the game progressed. Solange kind of became less value as the game kind of reached its conclusion, whereas Spice kind of peaked and then it kind of plateaued as the game worked itself out. And the final thing that I'll mention is that I wish there was a way to determine the play order, because going first in a round gives you open scope to all the spaces, and I know at the end of each round the first play marker gets passed on, but what if you really want to go first in the next round to help advance your strategy? There's no real way in Dune Imperium to manipulate that turn order because it is a worker placement game and all the spaces are valuable. Having that power to change the turn order in some way doesn't really exist in this game, and that for me made it a little bit frustrating at times. So, what did you think of Dune Imperium? Is it a game that you'd like to try, or have you played Dune Imperium and really enjoyed it or really disliked it? Please let me know your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. If you really like this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, as well as consider watching some of the other videos on this channel. It's a very simple and free way to help Board Game Sanctuary grow. Otherwise, this is Danny signing out. I think I'm gonna continue reading Frank Herbert's Dune and maybe read all of the other books and become a bookworm and ride into the desert.